Thank you all for coming here tonight. It's so wonderful to be in a gathering like this where I feel, both of us feel right at home with like-minded individuals, people that are seeking to continue support the really strong resistance movements in Latin America like Salvador and people that are trying to fight U.S. militarism, U.S. intervention all over the hemisphere and all over the world. So thank you all for coming and joining us tonight. So I'm just gonna give a little tiny introduction as to the theme of the evening and a little bit about what CISPES does, and also our special guest. I was just trying to make sure that Israel was getting exactly what I was saying too. So again, my name is Lisa Fuller and I'm with CISPES, the Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador. Some of you, who here has heard of CISPES before? Yeah, right. We've been around since 1980, 33 years now. We started as a movement of people in the United States that were dead set against U.S. Military support for the Salvadoran dictatorships that were repressing people, massacring people, especially during the Salvadoran Civil War, which lasted from 1980 to 1992. El Salvador is the size of Massachusetts, and in those 12 years, 75,000 civilians were killed, by 85% of which were by the Salvadoran state forces. And during that time, I mean, the Civil War was around an armed liberation struggle. You know, people that rose up in El Salvador and said, we want our country for us. We want to be able to have access to education, health care, jobs, land, and that is how the FMLN, which is the Barco Marti Front for National Liberation, they were the people's army in that time that were very much supported by the population and the social movements, the unions, the students, who weren't able to, at certain times, take to the streets and protest and demand that their needs be met by the government, because the government would just send out, you know, soldiers, the death squads, all of that, and that was the response. So CISPES arose in the 80s to say, hey, we in the United States, which was at that time giving $1 million a day to the Salvadoran military, we said, hell no. We are not going to stand for that. And since 1980, we have continued to be a grassroots movement based in the United States that is working directly with the left in El Salvador, with the unions, with the FMLN, which is now a political party, and against U.S. intervention, against things like the CAFTA, the Central American Free Trade Agreement, against things like the ILEA, the International Law Enforcement Academy, which is the sort of police version of the School of the Americas, which was imposed on El Salvador in 2005, and electoral intervention. The U.S. really tries to make sure that they get to decide who El Salvador's president is, time and time again, and elections are actually on the way. But there recently have been incredible gains in El Salvador. It's an incredibly exciting time. Since 2009, when the very first progressive president, the candidate of the FMLN, Mauricio Funes, won the elections. Despite incredible intimidation and fear campaigns and smear tactics mounted not only in El Salvador by the right wing, but also in the United States by their allies. In 2004 and in 2009, U.S. Congress people stood up and threatened the Salvadorans living in the United States with deportation, with saying that all remittances that would go back to El Salvador, that are basically the ways that people can survive, that those would be cut off if the Salvadoran people elected the progressive candidate. These are really, can you imagine if that happened in the United States? If some other country tried to dictate to us who we could elect? And that's exactly what the United States government tries to do. And, the elections in Honduras, which are tomorrow, the U.S. has definitely been on the wrong side of that issue. They're already, making threats around El Salvador's elections, which are in February. And so now more than ever, there needs to be strong resistance here in the United States to confront these threats. Because that was what really supported the election of Mauricio Funes in 2009, which led to incredible changes in education, which our invited guest is going to talk about, but not just education, also healthcare, also re-stimulating the agricultural sector, and a tremendous amount of policies that we're seeing where the government is actually, in El Salvador, is actually being reoriented from an entity that was basically designed to keep the rich rich and the poor poor, to actually providing services to the most marginalized, the most excluded sectors of the population. Women, the elderly, people in rural communities. And it's extremely exciting. And of course, this bumps up against U.S. economic interests in the country, which is why the U.S. is hell-bent on trying to stop these really exciting changes. But I'll leave it there, and I'll let our special guest talk more about it. So we're actually ending a national tour right now here at the Vigil, and we're delighted to be doing that. Israel Montano is the president of the historic Public Teachers Union in El Salvador, Andes 21 de Junio, which is the oldest teachers union in El Salvador. It was started in the 1960s, and it was one of the most outspoken against the regime during the Civil War, so they therefore suffered the most losses of any union in El Salvador during the armed conflict. They continue to be a union of teachers dedicated to social change, social transformation, and so we are delighted to have Israel Montano here to speak about the really amazing gains happening in the country in education. So without further ado, let's give him applause. Israel Montano.
Gracias, compañeros y compañeras. Reciban un saludo fraterno, solidario, cariñoso, pero más que todo un revolucionario del pueblo de Farabundo Martí. Para mí es un placer muy grande esta noche dirigirme a ustedes. Soy, como dijo Lisa, Israel Montano Osorio, el secretario general de la Asociación Nacional de Educadores Salvadoreños, Andes 21 de junio, nacida un 21 de junio de 1965. A la fecha hemos tenido varias conquistas en mi sindicato y los dirigentes fundadores de mi sindicato también con orgullo fueron los fundadores del Frente Farabundo Martí para la Liberación Nacional. Para nosotros, con alegría, decimos por qué es que existe un vínculo entre Andes 21 de junio y el partido FMLN.
Will traduce.
Oh, yo pensé que iban traduciendo. Inicio, pues,
Todos.
Ok. Bueno, y todo. Un saludo, dije, ser solidario, revolucionario de la tierra de Farabundo Martín.
Thank you for being here, men and women. I want to extend a kind, a welcome in solidarity, a warm welcome, and most of all, a revolutionary welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Israel Montano, as I said, and I'm from the FMLN, which was formed on the 21st of June of 1967. The syndicate was formed of many founders, the original members of the FMLN.
His union, the National Association of Salvador Educators was founded on that date, but he's also, there are founders, you might not, and some of the same founders of the union also founded the FMLN. And so you might ask why that is.
Claro. Bueno, decía que para mí es un honor estar ante este evento y hablar de El Salvador, algo que es muy importante, creo, para todos y todas en el momento coyuntural que vivimos.
So for me, it's an honor to be here with all of you.
So thank you all for being here, and I'm just going to take a little bit of time to explain the current political moment that we're in.
Para nosotros en El Salvador, dije que nuestro sindicato nació el 21 de junio del 65 y a la fecha, con 48 años de historia, hemos caminado mucho y hemos logrado mucho para la democracia de El Salvador.
So our union was founded on the 21st of June in 1965, and in these 48 years of our existence, we have achieved a lot, and there's a lot of good things to talk about.
Con orgullo, en mi país, los dirigentes de mi sindicato fueron los mismos que crearon el instrumento político militar que inició la guerra en El Salvador, llamado Frente Farabundo Martí para la Liberación Nacional, FMLN.
So I say that with pride. Some of the members of our union were the same people who formed the front that was called the FMLN.
Nuestra fundadora en mi sindicato, la doctora y profesora Mélida Anaya Montes,
So the founder of our union, Melida Anaya Montes,
posteriormente fue la llamada comandante Ana María.
was formerly known as the Commander Ana Maria.
De igual manera, el profesor y licenciado José Mario López Alvarenga,
And Jose Mario Lopez Alvarenga
fue el comandante Venancio Salvatierra.
was later known as the Commander.
Y al igual que ellos, muchos maestros y maestras tomaron la decisión de una lucha armada en el país.
So these teachers made the decision to take up an armed struggle in our country.
Bueno, y así se dio la guerra en mi país. No voy a hablar de la guerra en este momento.
And that's how the war happened in my country, and I'm not going to talk too much about the war right now.
Después de firmados los acuerdos de paz en 1992,
After we signed the peace accords in 1992,
inició un proceso de reconciliación y de posguerra en mi país que generó varios fenómenos que actualmente nos afectan.
So we went through a period of reconciliation in my country that generated or created a few situations that are still affecting us today.
100,000 militares se desmovilizaron después de la guerra.
So 100,000 soldiers were demobilized after the war.
15,000 heroicos guerrilleros también se desmovilizaron.
And also 15,000 heroic guerrilla fighters.
Ambos dejaron niños huérfanos, porque muchos cayeron en la guerra y otros emigraron a este país.
On both sides, they left behind orphans because a lot of people died during the war, and also many people migrated to the U.S.
Los gobiernos de la época jamás implementaron políticas para poder incluir en programas a estos niños.
So the governments, the administrations at that time didn't enact policies that would include these orphans, that would create programs for these orphans.
Dicha generación infantil quedó sin protección paternal.
So that generation of kids was left without the protection of parents.
Y en este país, especialmente en Los Ángeles y en California, surgieron las pandillas y luego las exportaron de aquí para El Salvador.
So in places like LA and California, that's how the gangs began to emerge, and then later those gangs were exported back to El Salvador.
Y esos niños desprotegidos fueron víctimas de los pandilleros que expulsaron de Estados Unidos a El Salvador.
And
Y a,
those kids became victims of the gangs that were exported to El Salvador.
y hoy tenemos un problema muy serio, como es la delincuencia juvenil a través de las pandillas y la delincuencia juvenil.
So now we have a serious problem with crime amongst youth in El Salvador.
Pero a pesar de las cosas negativas, que eso es uno de los problemas más grandes,
But despite the negative things, such as this, which is one of our biggest problems,
al iniciar la transición de 188 años dirigidos, gobernados por la derecha, mi país
after 188 years of being governed by the right wing in our country,
en tan solo 4 años y medio y 6 meses, hemos logrado muchos cambios que favorecen al pueblo salvadoreño.
in only 4.5 years, we've seen a lot of changes that are beneficial to the Salvadoran people.
Para mí es un agrado hablar especialmente de los cambios que hemos tenido en educación, dado que soy profesor.
So for me, it's a pleasure to talk about the changes that we've seen in education, given that I'm a teacher.
Primero, el mecanismo utilizado por el actual gobierno para elaborar el plan social de educación Vamos a la Escuela.
So for example, the mechanism that's used by the current government, which is an education plan called Let's Go to School.
En el plan se nos consultó a todos los sindicatos de maestros, junto al vicepresidente de la República y ministro de Educación en su momento, el profesor Salvador Sánchez.
So for this plan, they consulted with all of the teachers' unions in the country, together with the Vice President of the nation and the Minister of Education.
Y junto al ministro de Educación y los respectivos sindicatos, elaboramos el plan antes mencionado.
So together with the Minister of Education, together with the teachers' unions, we created this plan that's called Let's Go to School.
Para los sindicatos de educación era histórico. Por primera vez en tantos años, o en 44 años de historia, no se había podido trabajar junto al gobierno.
So for the teachers' unions, this was very historic. We had never been able to work together with the government before.
Por primera vez realizamos el mecanismo de los paquetes escolares.
So for the first time, we were prioritizing school packets.
Para nosotros era como lo fundamental, lo prioritario para que los niños pudiesen con lo mínimo ir a la escuela.
So for us, this was a priority so that kids could, at least as a bare minimum, go to school.
Se priorizó dotarlos de útiles escolares, cuadernos.
So it became a priority to provide them with school materials such as notebooks.
2 uniformes, un par de zapatos, un tiempo de comida o refrigerio escolar y un vaso de leche.
And then also uniforms, a pair of shoes to wear to school, and a meal that included milk.
Para nosotros el desafío era cómo utilizar una estrategia para que los niños llegaran a la escuela.
So for us, it was a question of how to use this as a strategy so that kids could come to school.
En los gobiernos anteriores teníamos 950,000 niños en el sistema de educación pública.
So during previous governments, we had 950,000 kids attending school.
Hoy, con la aplicación de los paquetes escolares, atendemos 1,500,000 niños.
So now with these packages available for students, we have 1.5 million kids attending school.
Eso implica que más de 500,000 de niños no tenían posibilidades ni lo necesario para ir a la escuela.
So that means that more than 500,000 children didn't have what they needed to be able to attend school before.
Luego se priorizó que el paquete escolar en sí al Estado le cuesta $73 millones.
So then we found that these packages were costing the government $73 million.
Pero los sindicatos y el ministro priorizamos pedirle al presidente de la República que se prohibiera comprar zapatos, comprar uniformes a las transnacionales y a los grandes millonarios de mi país.
The unions, together with the Minister of Education, made it a priority that we weren't buying these shoes, these pairs of shoes, from large multinational corporations.
Eso nos permitió la generación de empleo.
So this also generated jobs.
Implementamos los talleres de zapatería, los talleres de sastrería.
So we opened up shoe shops.
De igual manera implementamos la ganadería, la producción de leche en los pequeños agricultores y préstamos del Banco de Fomento Agropecuario para la lechería.
So we also started livestock operations, and we worked with the Ministry of Agriculture to open up small agricultural projects.
Proyectos pilotos para generar como la fábrica de envasar la leche que se les otorga a los niños.
So we did this to produce milk, and we also opened up small factories that would bottle the milk for schools.
Bueno, eso ha generado más de 50,000 empleos directos a la gente que antes no tenía trabajo.
So this has created over 50,000 jobs for people who before didn't have any work.
Esta es la parte de los programas sociales que la derecha, los partidos de la derecha y la empresa privada nos critican que hacemos esto porque es receta de Cuba.
So these are the kind of social programs that
the right-wing political parties and private companies criticize us for saying that we're trying to implement Cuba's plan or Cuba's design.
Y que es receta de Venezuela y de otros países para desnaturalizar lo que hacemos.
Or of Venezuela or other countries to delegitimize what we're doing.
Sin embargo, los sindicatos de maestros y otros sindicatos de trabajadores hemos cerrado filas para respaldar los cambios que han iniciado en El Salvador.
But however, teachers unions and other unions have closed our ranks in order to defend the progress that's being made in El Salvador.
Otro tema que hemos priorizado es el tema de la calidad educativa.
So another thing that we've prioritized is the quality of education.
Creo que es importante pensar en que hay que tener una educación de calidad y una educación que sea gratis cuando la dé el Estado para todos.
So we think that it's important to have a quality education that's provided for free by the government for everyone.
En 4 años de gobierno del cambio, hemos logrado que la educación sea totalmente gratis desde educación inicial hasta tercer año de bachillerato.
So in the 4 years of this government of change, we've been able to achieve completely free education for everyone from elementary school up into the 3rd year of high school.
Para nosotros es un gran triunfo tener la educación hasta bachillerato gratis. La lucha que viene al futuro es lograr el acceso de todos estos jóvenes a la Universidad de El Salvador.
So for us, it's a huge victory to have achieved free education up through high school, and the struggle that we have ahead of us is to achieve free university education for everyone.
En esa dirección, la actual fórmula presidencial que preside el profesor Salvador Sánchez Serén.
So the presidential plan that preceded the current president,
Salvador Sánchez Serén.
Salvador Sanchez Serén, candidate.
Él lleva en su plan de gobierno abrir una universidad en cada departamento de El Salvador.
He has in his plan for the presidency to open a university in every region of El Salvador.
Y la universidad es la misma universidad nacional, solo que con oficinas, ¿verdad?, que atiendan a los jóvenes de los 14 departamentos.
And this would be the same university on the national level, but with offices in each of the 14 departments for the youth of El Salvador.
Antes 21 de junio, nos hemos comprometido con El Salvador, con el país, para tener una conducta positiva.
So before the 21st of June, we've made a promise with El Salvador to have a positive plan, a positive campaign.
Y para ello hemos priorizado hacer propuestas en la elaboración de políticas educativas para beneficiar a la mayoría de niños y niñas.
And for them, it's necessary to have an educational proposal, a plan for the majority of the students of El Salvador.
Nuestra política es primero la propuesta y después la protesta, porque tampoco nos vamos a desarmar de la protesta sindical.
And our plan is to first have a plan, a project, and then we protest, because our union's plan is to continue protesting and struggling.
El sindicato que renuncia a la protesta se muere.
Any union which renounces protest is going to die.
Pero nosotros hemos dicho que si existe una buena relación de trabajo con el Ministerio de Educación, no hay razón de protestar.
But we say that if there's a good relationship with the Ministry of Education, then there's no reason to protest.
Hemos iniciado un movimiento pedagógico alternativo en El Salvador.
We've started a pedagogical educational initiative here in El Salvador
Bajo el método pedagógico del maestro Paulo Freire de Brasil,
under the educational methodology of Pablo Freire of Brazil,
que establece que nadie se educa solo, todos nos educamos en comunidad, ¿verdad? Y el aprendizaje tiene que hacerse con la práctica.
he says that no one is educated alone. We are all educated in community. And that learning is something which we do with practice. To learn by doing.
Correcto, aprender haciendo. Para nosotros los niños, ¿verdad? Tienen que pasar de la metodología tradicional que la pedagogía bancaria nos ha enseñado a una nueva pedagogía de un nuevo modelo educativo, que es el que estamos construyendo.
So yeah, we learn by doing, and for the kids, learning by the traditional methods, but then including this new pedagogy gives us the means to create something new.
Estamos trabajando, completando la reforma curricular en el sistema educativo.
We're working to complete a reform in the curriculum of our educational system.
No podemos seguir enseñando la historia de China, de Grecia, de Mesopotamia y ocultando la verdadera historia de El Salvador.
We can't be teaching the history of China and the history of Greece, of Mesopotamia, at the same time that we're hiding the history of our own country, of El Salvador.
Luego de conocer nuestra historia, tenemos que estudiar la historia de América Latina y la de América antes de ir a conocer la historia del otro mundo.
Once we have educated about our own history, then we need to focus on that of Latin America and of America before expanding our learning to the whole world.
Esto nos compromete para que trabajemos de la mano, primero buscando esfuerzos de unidad con todos los sectores.
So this is our promise, to do the work that's at hand and to include all of the different sectors.
En este sentido, la escuela inclusiva de tiempo pleno es como el método que aplicaremos para prevenir la violencia juvenil.
In this form of education, the school in this time will be teaching through a methodology that should prevent youth violence.
¿Qué significa la escuela de tiempo pleno?
What is the real-time school? full-time?
Para nosotros, para los salvadoreños, este es un método en donde el profesor, para trabajar en su comunidad, primero tiene que conocer la comunidad, interactuar con los padres, con los estudiantes y con los demás instituciones del entorno.
This is a method in which the teacher in a community knows the community. They know the parents, they know the students, and they know everyone else who's involved in the schools.
Los maestros de Andes somos los más comprometidos porque tenemos oposición. Hay otros profesores que no se quieren sumar a este esfuerzo. Los maestros de Andes son comprometidos porque otros profesores no se quieren sumar a esto.
So the teachers from before were implicated or
So the teachers in our union are committed to promoting this model with teachers who aren't part of the union.
Eso implica el trabajo voluntario de maestros y maestras a nivel nacional, hasta de 10, 12 y algunos hasta de 15 horas diarias, con la misma remuneración que trabajamos todos, que son 5 horas al día.
work on this has included voluntary work and work on a national level. Some are working 10 or 15 hours per day at the same pay rate as everyone else.
La escuela de tiempo pleno en la mañana es una jornada normal de trabajo, pero en la tarde se forman grupos de niños y niñas para deportes de toda clase, para danza, pintura, para música, orquestas juveniles, etc.
In the full-time school, the morning is like a regular school day, but in the afternoon, groups form of all the children for full-class sports, dance, painting, music classes, and so on.
Es algo que por el momento la preocupación de los que conformamos un Consejo Nacional de Educación, que es otro elemento que los sindicatos le pedimos al ministro que formara.
So right now, this is something that we're really worrying about now that we're having national conversations, and we plan to ask the minister that.
Este Consejo Nacional de Educación es el primero que discute las propuestas que surgen de los sindicatos y luego este determina si se aplican o no se aplican en el sistema educativo.
So this advisory board, this national conference, is that which discusses the union proposals, and they decide whether to apply what has been proposed by the union or not to apply it.
Un poco explicar cómo se integra el Consejo. Ahí hay religiosos de la Iglesia Evangélica, de la Iglesia Católica, dirigentes de sindicatos, de ONGs, de la Universidad de El Salvador. De igual manera, los titulares de educación.
So to explain a little bit, the makeup of this advisory board includes religious people, people from the evangelical church, people from the Catholic Church, leaders of the unions, the non-governmental organizations from the university, and also people who are within the Ministry of Education.
En mi caso, como por ser el secretario general de antes, formo parte de esa comisión nacional. Y quiero decir que los representantes de la empresa privada, cuando vamos a votar la aplicación de una política educativa, siempre salen perdiendo. Somos mayoría los que queremos los cambios.
So the Secretary of UNDIS is a part of this advisory board. And that is to say, there are also representatives of private business on this board. And so whenever we get together and the advisory board meets, our proposals fail. We are the majority of the people working in education, and yet our proposals don't pass. Minority proposals. Okay, sorry.
Solo también compartir con ustedes la preocupación de esa comisión de los sindicatos es cómo financiar estos proyectos tan importantes que tiene el actual gobierno de educación. Porque lo financiamos con los impuestos, pero si queremos implementar la escuela plena, de tiempo pleno, implica que hay que aumentar el presupuesto de educación.
So, right now the Commission is worried about how to finance our projects because currently we use our taxes to pay for education, but in order to implement this new proposal, our full-time school, then we will have to have a larger budget.
Antes le ha hecho una propuesta al presidente y le hemos dicho que se amarren los pantalones y que haga una reforma tributaria y fiscal para que los millonarios paguen más impuestos que los pobres.
So Andes has sent a proposal to the president and really wants to grab them and say, hey, we need to change this. We need taxes to be greater for the rich than they are for the poor.
Pero tiene miedo que le pase lo que le hicieron a Mel Zelaya en Honduras.
But our fear is that if this passes, that what happened in Honduras to Zelaya may happen here.
Por lo tanto, creemos que hemos iniciado las bases fundamentales de los cambios en mi país, pero debe de continuar.
And therefore, while this is the basis, while we're forming a foundation for change in our country, we need this to continue.
Por eso es importante esta noche compartir con ustedes estas experiencias y pedirles que imploren a sus congresistas para que no interfieran en los procesos internos en mi país.
And so this is why it's so important tonight to share these experiences with you all and to ask you to implore your representatives in Congress that they not interfere with what we're doing in our own country.
Es lamentable que cualquier comentario simple de un congresista norteamericano en El Salvador aparece en primera plana en todos los medios de comunicación en contra del gobierno y en contra del FMLN.
It's a sad fact that any commentary, however small, from your representatives in the United States is front page news. And it's against the government and it's against the FMLN.
En la gira que hemos hecho gracias a CISPES, estas 2 semanas que concluyen este fin de semana, me ha tocado ir a visitar a congresistas allá en el Capitolio.
So, what we've been doing with CISPES over the last 2 weeks and finishing this week, I've had a chance to go and to speak with representatives in Washington, D.C.
Y a uno de ellos, cuando preguntaba a su asistente, ¿y qué es lo que podemos hacer? Mi respuesta fue callarse, no hablar.
So, and one of those representatives, when their assistant asked, well, what is it that we can do for you? I said, well, actually, just shut up, don't talk.
Nos ayuda más no comentando el tema que hablando del tema.
It actually helps us more if you don't talk about things in El Salvador than if you do.
Porque el pueblo más pobre siente los cambios en El Salvador. Pero el que no conoce, no siente, ni percibe, ni ve qué es lo que ocurre en otro país.
Because the poor people in El Salvador, they feel these changes. But those who aren't there, they can't see, they can't feel what's happening in El Salvador, in another country.
Nos critican de que recibimos línea comunista, totalitarista, pero eso no es cierto. La línea que nosotros recibimos es la del pueblo salvadoreño que necesita vivir mejor.
And they criticize us because they say we're getting fed a line from the communists or the radicals or whoever, but it's not. It's what we're hearing from our citizens in El Salvador, from the poor.
Precisamente eso es esa acción que nosotros realizamos junto al pueblo, es la que nos da la confianza y creemos que el 2 de febrero de 2014 los cambios en El Salvador van a continuar.
And it's precisely for this reason, from what we hear from our own community, that we believe that on the 2nd of February, that we are going to have a victory.
Les pedimos a ustedes, los invito para que participen y yendo a El Salvador como observadores internacionales, para que veamos de cerca y no le demos oportunidad a los adversarios, enemigos, a querer acusar que se ha hecho fraude en el proceso electoral.
And we ask you, we're inviting you to participate, to come as international observers, to see from here, from close up, rather than hearing from our enemies, from those who are far away, that we've had some sort of electoral fraud.
Podríamos hablar más, pero el tiempo no nos da.
We could talk much more about this, but we don't have enough time.
Sí, voy a concluir con la siguiente reflexión.
So I'll conclude with the following reflection.
Solamente un pueblo que se organiza, que se une para defender lo suyo, triunfa.
Only a community which is organized and united to defend its own can triumph.
Por eso los maestros hemos tomado, y las maestras, perdón, hemos tomado la decisión de conducir un movimiento social que está integrado por mujeres, jóvenes, campesinos, estudiantes y profesionales para crear un movimiento popular.
So it's for this reason that we teachers have made a decision to drive forward a social movement which is made up of women, of youth, of rural farmers, of students, of white-collar professionals to make up a popular movement.
Y los aliados naturales de ese movimiento somos los maestros y las maestras, porque estamos en cualquier rincón o lugar del territorio salvadoreño.
And the roots, the connecting points of this movement are the teachers, because in any place that you are in El Salvador, we have teachers.
Ese es el compromiso, compañeros y compañeras. Les invito a que respalden este proceso que hemos iniciado en El Salvador. Es un socialismo natural salvadoreño, con olor a pupusas. No le copiamos a nadie.
And so this is our promise, and we're inviting you to support us, to be at our backs in moving forward this movement. And it's a social movement.
It's a socialism, a 21st century socialism that is naturally Salvadoran, that smells of pupusas. And we're not copying anyone. This is our own thing.
Es que nos acusan de que somos comunistas, que queremos crear el socialismo. Yo les digo, sí, es cierto, pero un socialismo sin copiar a nadie. Es con sabor a salvadoreños y salvadoreñas.
So we're not communists. Don't accuse us of being that. You accuse us of being socialists. And we're socialists, yes, but of the El Salvadoran variety, an original, not a copy.
Bueno, llego hasta aquí y luego va a haber un espacio de preguntas. Lisa va a participar nuevamente. Les agradezco la atención y si quieren saber más, preparen la pregunta para su oportunidad. Muchas gracias y buenas noches.
Here, I'm going to leave some space for questions, and Lisa can participate again a little bit more. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
So I just want to say a couple of things about what we've been doing on our national tour, because these changes that Israel has been talking about are super exciting. They're exciting to us, and not a whole lot of people get to hear about these things because we don't hear about the good news from El Salvador. We don't hear about, we hear about the gangs, we hear about the violence, we hear about all these things, but actually really wonderful things are happening. And of course, part of the reason why we don't hear about the good things in El Salvador is because the right wing owns the media there, just like they do here. And they definitely try to control the message. And the message that they want to send is that, there isn't a democracy blossoming in El Salvador. That there isn't hope. And that is absolutely wrong. It's a lie. We've heard it ourselves. And so what we've been doing all across the country is inviting people to participate in supporting democracy in the country. Already, our congresspeople have sent letters that have been published in the Salvadoran papers saying because the left-wing candidate is leading in the polls, that they are concerned that fraud is going to happen in the elections in both Honduras and El Salvador. Merely because the candidate that they want is not leading in the polls. They're trying to set the stage to delegitimize the elections in El Salvador. And this is the tactic that we saw in 2009 when 5 days before the elections, congressmen stood up and claimed the FMLN had links to Al-Qaeda, that Salvadorans would be deported, and all these other things would happen if the leftist candidate won the elections. And it was largely because of the work of international solidarity, CISPES and other groups that have been working with our members of Congress, working with our communities to raise awareness that these threats would come, that we blasted the State Department with calls, and we blasted our congresspeople with calls demanding that the State Department say, we will work with whichever candidate is elected in your country. You can vote without fear. And the Friday before the elections happened on Sunday, we got that statement. We got that statement, we published it in the Salvadoran papers. Our allies in Andes 21 de Junio and the FMLN and the social movement took that ad in the papers and they copied it and they pasted it on everybody's door. So people could know that they could elect whichever candidate they wanted to without fear of US retaliation. And that's exactly what we need to do this year. Right now, there is a letter circulating by a couple of congresspeople that we are trying to get as many congressional signatures on, which is demanding that John Kerry, the Secretary of State, issue a public neutrality statement with respect to the elections, saying that the US government will work with whichever candidate is elected in February of this year. And so these green papers that you all see, these are part of our National Call-In Day, which is happening right now, for everyone to call your congresspeople and ask them to sign this letter. Sign this letter that is going to pressure the State Department to issue a public neutrality statement well in advance of 2 days before the elections, so that whenever the ultra-conservatives decide, who are being lobbied by their partners in El Salvador, come up and say these horrible lies that then get front page news, Salvadorans can rest at ease because the official position of the government will already have been stated by the State Department. So it's very, very important that we get as many congressional signers on this letter to make a really strong statement to the State Department to demonstrate that, look, the people in the United States stand with the people of El Salvador and their right to free and fair elections in 2014, just like we should have the right to free and fair elections here. So I know we can't call Congress today, but I implore you to call on Monday. This letter is going to remain open for the next couple of weeks. We're going to continue to have call-in days. We've already got at least 12 signers on there. We're hoping to get 50. So everyone here can do your part. And seriously, one congressperson getting 5 calls can make the difference. It really, really can. They never hear from their constituents. So when we do raise our voices, it does matter. We can help free and fair elections to happen in El Salvador. The other thing, so if you want to continue to get news about these and get reminders about these call-in days, please sign on our sign-in sheet that's circulating right now. There's one right here. Where's the second one? Right there. Just keep it moving along, please. And also, we're going to have an election observer delegation from January 25th to February 5th to observe the elections and to support our partners in El Salvador in the case that the right tries to commit fraud or destabilize the country around the elections. Because what very well may happen is what happened in Venezuela in the most recent elections, right? Where the right wing, the left wing wins, the right wing destabilizes, the US government leaves space for the right wing to wreak havoc in the country by not recognizing the democratically elected president. So everybody here, I hope, can be on guard and be supportive in that time for El Salvador, just like we're going to be there for Honduras this weekend and in the days to come. So please join us to observe the elections. SOAW Watch is also sending an election observer delegation. And there may well also be a second round of elections, March 9th, because of how the election rules go. There's 3 candidates. In order to win the presidency, you have to have 50% of the votes plus 1 vote. So it's hard to do it with 3 candidates. So most likely there will be a second round of elections, March 9th. We're going to be there too, and we invite you all to be there with us. So I see that there's a question, so maybe we can get to that portion of the time right now.
I have 2 questions. My first question is, who is the candidate which the United States is supporting the most right now, and the name of the 3rd candidate as well? And also, with the recent violence that broke out with the social movements that were trying to help people find their disappeared children, disappeared loved ones, do you foresee a violent reaction from the government as well as from the Catholic Church, and how they intervened because of their response to those protests wasn't very positive? So I was wondering if you could speak to that and how you feel the elections will be affected in that.
Maybe we could take another couple of questions, if there are others, and then we can answer them all in a little group. Can everybody hear?
In the U.S., you said to write the representative, does the House of Representatives as well as the Senate?
Just to quickly answer that question, right now it's reps that we're trying to get to sign on to this letter, House of Representatives. Not senators yet. Senators, I think, can actually sign on to the Dear Colleague letter, the letter that these representatives are sending out. That Vargas, Honda, and Mark Pocan in Wisconsin are sponsoring. But yeah, I believe senators can sign on. We're gonna wait to see if we want to do a second Senate letter.
Can citizens of El Salvador in the United States vote in this election? What's the provision for them to vote in this election?
So I'll quickly answer that question too, because it's an easy one. This will be the first election in history where Salvadorans living outside of El Salvador can vote by absentee ballot. And that's incredible, because there's millions of Salvadorans that live around the world, and this is just one of the other exciting democratic changes that we've seen under this current administration. But maybe I'll let Israel answer the question that the compañera had over there, and then...
How would they get the absentee vote?
What?
Where would they get absentee ballots?
They get them mailed to them.
So
Yep.
they have to call the...
They have to register with their consulate, and that registration period has ended. But yes, people are going to be mailing in their ballots for both rounds of the elections. Okay, let's take these last 2 questions and then we'll start answering.
I just wanted to point out, I didn't notice it first, but on the back of this, there's a sample script.
My question is about the education plan that's being proposed. I'm a great fan of Paulo Freire. I actually heard him speak one time, and his method of conscientization is really powerful. And my question is, have we got to the point yet of having a pilot program so that you can point in your proposal to the government, you can point to a project that is already in process and working in its effects, so it demonstrates how powerful and excellent it is.
Trataré de ser un poco breve en la respuesta. Quizás para avanzar comenzaré con la última pregunta que me acaba de hacer sobre el plan de educación y el método de Pablo Freire. Quiero decir que como antes del 21 de junio como sindicato nos hemos propuesto aplicar esa metodología aunque no esté en la currícula.
I'm going to try to make this short here. I'm going to start with the last question first about the education plan and the methodology of Paulo Freire. Right now, our union on this 21 de junio has proposed that this methodology be applied already, even though there hasn't necessarily been a sort of big government plan to introduce it.
Por ejemplo, los maestros y las maestras de mi sindicato ya iniciaron en sus centros escolares a aplicar la nueva metodología.
So the teachers of Andes 21 de Junio have already begun implementing the new methodology in certain schools.
Y la respuesta de los niños y de las niñas es positivo. Por ejemplo, yo siempre pongo el ejemplo más sencillo. En la clase de lenguaje, el tema la composición. Le doy una página de papel en blanco y el niño se le dice que escriba una composición. Por ejemplo, un día en mi casa.
So right now the response has been really positive, and I'll just give you a really simple example of this new methodology from language class, and particularly composition class. So, you know, we give the kids a blank page of paper and we ask them to write a composition. For example, a day in my house.
Y la respuesta que obtenemos es impresionante. Muchos niños dicen que sus padres los maltratan, que sus hermanos los maltratan, algunos que son abusados, y eso es como un diagnóstico para iniciar ese nuevo método de enseñanza que nosotros queremos implementar.
And the response is really impactful. You know, what the kids write, you know, a lot of them say, my parents aren't treating me right. My brothers and sisters aren't treating me right. You know, that abuses are happening in the house. And this, for us, is a really good diagnostic tool in terms of like what kinds of methodologies we need to be implementing in the schools.
De igual manera lo hemos dicho, un día en mi escuela, y resulta que es el director, el profesor, el que maltrata al chico.
We've also done it a day in my school, and you know the result is like, oh, the principal or the teacher, you know, is treating me poorly.
Bueno, hay muchos ejemplos, no es el momento para explicarlos, pero hemos iniciado 10,000 profesores de Andes, por lo menos 5,000 estamos en las condiciones de implementar ese método y lo vamos a institucionalizar en el siguiente gobierno del FMLN.
So there's lots of examples, and unfortunately it's not the time to kind of go through them all, but just to say that, the 10,000 teachers that Audios 21 has, at least 5,000 of them are implementing this methodology, and that we will institutionalize this methodology in the next administration.
Y con relación a la pregunta de las urnas, el control de los votos en el extranjero, quiero decirle que es histórico. Por primera vez, el voto en el exterior. El FMLN tenía como 15 años o 20 años de tener en el Congreso la propuesta y nunca se había aprobado la ley. Hoy, con esta ley, por primera vez votarán los salvadoreños en el exterior, pero van a ser muy poquitos, porque solamente aquel que se registró y sacó su documento único personal lo podrá hacer. El que no lo hizo no podrá hacerlo.
So just with respect to the question around voting and the polls and the ballot boxes and the absentee ballot, for 15 years the FMLN has had the proposal to be able to have the absentee vote for Salvadorans abroad, and it's sat there in Congress. So it's historic, it's absolutely historic that this is happening for the very first time this year, that Salvadorans all over the world will be able to vote. But just to say that there haven't been many Salvadorans that have registered, because it was up to each one of them to take their ID document and go and get themselves registered. And so whoever did that, yes, is going to be able to vote, and those who didn't aren't.
La mayoría de trabajadores de los diferentes consulados, ¿verdad?, de El Salvador, acá en los Estados Unidos y en todas las partes del mundo, son trabajadores que responden a los gobiernos anteriores, son enemigos nuestros, por eso obstaculizan el proceso.
The majority of the workers in the consulates in the United States and all around the world, they are, they were appointed by the right wing, and so they are from the right, and so they're enemies of ours that have blocked this process as much as they could.
Él quiere hacer otra pregunta, el amigo.
No, it's not a question.
Okay.
It's a comment. No, it's about, I am a Salvadorian. And I have a problem to vote because the consulate in Chicago don't make the publicity to do this or to be registered in our consulate. I am a Salvadorian and I have a trouble to vote because the consulate don't give publication about a day to expend the document in BOI. And that is a problem right now because pretty soon and right now we can vote. It's true, it's very sad, but many Salvadorians in Chicago and in other states, they don't will vote because they have the opportunity to have the DUI with a document which we can vote. And that is true what the compañero say here. We have this problem, and we asking for that. I was a professor in El Salvador. I came here, and I have the problem. We try to organize that, but the consulate, we have a problem with them.
Thank you.
Gracias. Voy a responder ahí a ella. Ella explicó. Ok. Bueno, la respuesta es la siguiente para la compañera. Primero voy con el tema de los candidatos. Los candidatos, los tres candidatos, son tres, el del FMLN, ¿verdad? Está comprometido a continuar lo que ha hecho el primer gobierno del FMLN, valga la redundancia. Y en ese contexto, ¿verdad?, ha tenido buenas relaciones con los Estados Unidos. Es más, el presidente Barack Obama llegó a visitar al presidente y al vicepresidente de El Salvador. Y el actual presidente del FMLN es el vicepresidente. No hay duda que hay buena comunicación. De igual manera, los otros dos candidatos tienen afinidad, solo que la afinidad la tienen con los congresistas republicanos, porque son de derecha. Esa es la diferencia. Es que el FMLN tiene amigos más en los congresistas demócratas, y Arena y la Unidad, que se llama el otro partido de derecha, los amigos son sus candidatos republicanos.
So, to get to the question that the compañera over here had, I'll start with the three candidates. So, of course, one of the candidates is from the FMLN, who is very committed to continuing the changes that have been developed under this current presidency. And actually, the current presidency, where the vice president is actually running to be the next president, they've been enjoying good relations with the United States, including that Barack Obama came and visited the president and vice president of El Salvador. So clearly there's been good communication that's been happening with that administration. Now, in terms of the other two candidates, there's the right-wing Arena candidate and then another right-wing candidate from the Unity Coalition. And they have more relations with the Republicans, especially Republican congressmen and congresspeople. And so, you know, the FMLN has some friends in the Democratic Party, whereas the right wing has friends in the Republican Party.
Con relación a lo de probúsqueda y de tutela legal, quizás explicar que las encuestas nos están dando 10 puntos de ventajas en contra de los otros partidos de derecha, y precisamente tienen temor de que las elecciones las van a perder la derecha, y creen que vamos a profundizar la justicia a aquellos que asesinaron a los padres jesuitas, a las monjas norteamericanas y a Monseñor Romero, y precisamente por eso le han ordenado al arzobispo de San Salvador que cierre tutela legal, y de igual manera han hecho el atentado en probúsqueda con la misma experiencia que tienen los escuadrones de la muerte, ¿verdad? Esa es la finalidad. Tienen miedo que van a perder las elecciones.
So, you know, in terms of what has been happening with the human rights organization, Pro Búsqueda, which recently had their, this is an aside, recently had their offices raided at gunpoint, their computers stolen, their staff members beaten, and their archives burned, their human rights documentation archives burned, according to the polls, the left wing is 10 points ahead of the right in terms of the elections. And so clearly, like, it looks like the left could very well win the next elections, and that we are going to continue and further the justice, the climate of justice in the country. which includes, you know, the case of the Jesuits that were massacred, which includes the case of the nuns from the United States, Monsignor Romero, Archbishop Romero, and for this reason, the right is scared, and so they ordered the current Archbishop of El Salvador to close the historic human rights office, Tutela Legal, a different office from Pro Búsqueda, but have also ordered or reactivated the death squad structures around Pro Búsqueda to carry out that in order to, because they're scared they're going to lose the elections, and they want to generate fear right now in the country.
What is the name of the
Salvador Sánchez Serén como presidente y vicepresidente Oscar Samuel Ortiz.
And it's worth mentioning that Salvador Sánchez Serén, since we're talking about education a lot tonight, was the Minister of Education that started all these different programs of that we have been hearing about tonight, including an adult literacy program where over 140,000 adults around the country have learned how to read and write and do basic math.
What's the official relationship between the current government and military, the official? And secondly, what's the reality of that relationship?
Bueno, en el momento actual, el ministro de la Defensa fue un oficial, un general, que fue maltratado por los gobiernos anteriores, ¿verdad? Y nunca lo dejaron, bueno, nunca lo quisieron graduar de general, hasta que llegó el presidente actual, lo graduó de general, y él es el actual ministro de la Defensa. Hay buena relación con el gobierno y la Fuerza Armada, pero una cosa es los funcionarios que dirigen la Fuerza Armada y otra cosa es un ejército que ha tenido una escuela como en la que mañana vamos a pedir que la cierren, ¿verdad? Que lo que enseñan es a torturar, a asesinar y a desaparecer. Entonces yo pienso que en el momento hay buena relación.
So the current Minister of Defense was a high-ranking officer who had been treated poorly by past administrations under the right wing, who never wanted to allow him to become a general. And so actually he wasn't able to become a general until the current administration. So in that respect, there's kind of good relations between the current administration and the Ministry of Defense, the current Minister of Defense. But of course, it's one thing, you know, the functionaries that direct the army. It's another thing, the soldiers who themselves have been graduates of, you know, the very school that we're here to try to close down, where they learned how to torture, how to repress the people.
Bueno, si no hay más preguntas, ¿verdad?
Are there any more questions?
Dígame, joven.
Tell me.
My question is, what do you see as the relationship of solidarity between teachers in the United States and teachers in El Salvador? Teachers in the United States are often facing threats of privatization, of school closings, of lack of autonomy, and a new curriculum that's being imposed by corporations. And with this in mind, you have an inspiration for a statement of solidarity for teachers.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Muy buena la pregunta que me hace compañera. Primero, quiero decirle que en Washington DC nos reunimos ya con la gente de la NEA hay una gran diferencia en la organización de maestros de acá y la nuestra. Ellos argumentan no meterse en decisiones políticas, pero en la práctica sí lo hacen, porque son por constitución, por derecho, nosotros somos personas políticas y cuando nos toca actuamos. Entonces no podemos decir que no nos metemos.
So that's a really good question that the compañero has asked. And I just want to say that when I was in Washington, D.C., we met with the National Education Association, the NEA. And there's a really big difference in terms of how we organize ourselves as educators in El Salvador and how educators are organized here in the United States. And they were arguing that they don't want to get involved in politics, but nonetheless, they truly are involved. And for us, what we say is, when the politics affect you, you have to act. And so that's why we are actively involved in politics.
También nos reunimos con la AFT, el otro sindicato de maestros y maestras, y de igual manera hay una receptividad en que haya una comunicación, porque ellos están sorprendidos, óiganse bien, sorprendidos, tanto la NEA como AFT, como es que el sindicato de maestros en El Salvador está trabajando un proceso junto al gobierno. ¿Y por qué lo hace? Y porque nosotros promovemos al partido FMLN, esto les sorprende a ellos.
So I also got a chance to meet with the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers Union, and it was sort of the same thing. There's this willingness to listen to what we have to say, but they were extremely surprised that the union, is working with the government and is committed to, different transformations. And why would they work with the government? And why would we support the FMLN?
La pregunta que me hicieron tanto en un sindicato como en el otro es: explíqueme cómo hace un sindicato de profesores para estar insertados en un partido político a la vez. Eso no se puede. O sea, es solo el sindicato, pero no se es de un partido.
So, they kept on asking me, explain to me, how is it possible that, a teachers union or teachers are at the same time part of a political party? This really shouldn't happen. It's not appropriate. How does that work?
Y mi respuesta fue muy natural. Antes 21 de junio surgió por maestros líderes que decidieron crear una asociación que defienda a los maestros. Y cuando la represión se incrementó, era necesario crear otro instrumento. Y ese instrumento fue un instrumento político militar que le dio origen a la guerrilla salvadoreña el 10 de octubre de 1980. Y fueron los mismos maestros quienes hicieron eso.
So, and my response was really natural. Our union, Andes 21 de Junio, came to be in order to defend teachers. And when the repression increased so dramatically, it required that we create another tool to defend teachers. And that ended up being a political military body that came to be on the 10th of October 1980, the FMLN, and which was created to protect us and everyone.
Pero yo concluyo diciendo, no hay sindicato que sea neutral, que sea apolítico. Hay que leer a Francisco Gutiérrez, un costarricense, que habla la educación como praxis política. Todo sindicato o es de izquierda o es de derecha, pero tiene inclinación política. Muchas gracias.
So thank you for everybody again that was waiting. I'm just going to translate his last comments that it's impossible to be neutral, and we got to listen to the words of Francisco Gutierrez, a Costa Rican, who says that we have to practice praxis, and that no matter if it's the right or the left, there's always a political inclination. And you can't avoid that, you can't get away from that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. Men and women, I want to extend a kind, a welcome and solidarity, a warm welcome, and most of all, a revolutionary welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Israel Montano, as I said, and I'm from the FMLN, which was formed on the 21st of June of 1967. The syndicate was formed of many founders, the original members of the FMLN.
His union, the National Association of Salvador Educators was founded on that date, but he's also, and there are founders, you might not, and some of the same founders of the union also founded the FMLN. And so you might ask why that is.
Claro. Bueno, decía que para mí es un honor estar ante este evento y hablar de El Salvador, algo que es muy importante, creo, para todos y todas en el momento coyuntural que vivimos.
So for me, it's an honor to be here with all of you.
Thank you all for being here, and I'm just going to take a little bit of time to explain the current political moment that we're in.
Para nosotros en El Salvador, dije que nuestro sindicato nació el 21 de junio del 65 y a la fecha, con 48 años de historia, hemos caminado mucho y hemos logrado mucho para la democracia de El Salvador.
So our union was founded on the 21st of June in 1965, and in these 48 years of our existence, we have achieved a lot, and there's a lot of good things to talk about.
Con orgullo, en mi país, los dirigentes de mi sindicato fueron los mismos que crearon el instrumento político militar que inició la guerra en El Salvador, llamado Frente Farabundo Martí para la Liberación Nacional, FMLN.
So I say that with pride. Some of the members of our union were the same people who formed the front that was called the FMLN.
Nuestra fundadora en mi sindicato, la doctora y profesora Mélida Anaya Montes.
So the founder of our union, Melida Anaya Montes,
Posteriormente fue la llamada comandante Ana María.
was formerly known as the Commander Ana Maria.
De igual manera, el profesor y licenciado José Mario López Alvarenga.
It's extremely exciting, and of course this bumps up against U.S. economic interests in the country, which is why the U.S. is hell-bent on trying to stop these really exciting changes. But I'll leave it there. and I'll let our special guest talk more about it. So we're actually ending a national tour right now here at the Vigil, and we're delighted to be doing that. Israel Montano is the president of the historic Public Teachers Union in El Salvador, Andes 21 de Junio, which is the oldest teachers union in El Salvador. It was started in the 1960s, and it was one of the most outspoken against the regime during the Civil War, so they therefore suffered the most losses of any union in El Salvador during the armed conflict. They continue to be a union of teachers dedicated to social change, social transformation, and so we are delighted to have Israel Montano here to speak about the really amazing gains happening in the country in education. So without further ado, let's give him applause. Israel Montano.
Gracias, compañeros y compañeras. Reciban un saludo fraterno, solidario, cariñoso, pero más que todo revolucionario del pueblo de Farabundo Martí. Para mí es un placer muy grande esta noche dirigirme a ustedes. Soy, como dijo Lisa, Israel Montano Osorio, el secretario general de la Asociación Nacional de Educadores Salvadoreños, Andes 21 de junio, nacida un 21 de junio de 1965. A la fecha hemos tenido varias conquistas en mi sindicato y los dirigentes fundadores de mi sindicato también con orgullo fueron los fundadores del Frente Farabundo Martí para la Liberación Nacional. Para nosotros, con alegría, decimos por qué es que existe un vínculo entre Andes 21 de junio y el partido FMLN.
¿Quién traduce?
Yo pensé que iban traduciendo. Inicio, pues,
Todos.
Ok. Bueno, y todo. Un saludo, dije, ser solidario, revolucionario de la tierra de Farabundo Martí.
Thank you all for coming here tonight. It's so wonderful to be in a gathering like this where I feel, both of us feel right at home with like-minded individuals, people that are seeking to continue support the really strong resistance movements in Latin America, like Salvador, and people that are trying to fight U.S. militarism, U.S. intervention all over the hemisphere and all over the world. So thank you all for coming and joining us tonight. So I'm just gonna give a little tiny introduction as to the theme of the evening and a little bit about what CISPES does, and also our special guest. I was just trying to make sure that Israel was getting exactly what I was saying too. So, again, my name is Lisa Fuller, and I'm with CISPES, the Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador. Some of you, who here has heard of CISPES before? Yeah, right. We've been around since 1980, 33 years now. We started as a movement of people in the United States that were dead set against U.S. Military support for the Salvadoran dictatorships that were repressing people, massacring people, especially during the Salvadoran Civil War, which lasted from 1980 to 1992. El Salvador is the size of Massachusetts, and in those 12 years, 75,000 civilians were killed, by 85% of which were by the Salvadoran state forces. And during that time, I mean, the Civil War was around an armed liberation struggle. You know, people that rose up in El Salvador and said, we want our country for us. We want to be able to have access to education, healthcare, jobs, land, and that is how the FMLN, which is the Barco Marti Front for National Liberation, they were the people's army in that time that were very much supported by the population and the social movements, the unions, the students, who weren't able to, at certain times, take to the streets and protest and demand that their needs be met by the government, because the government would just send out, you know, soldiers, the death squads, all of that, and that was the response. So CISPES arose in the 80s to say, hey, we in the United States, which was at that time giving $1 million a day to the Salvadoran military, we said, hell no, we are not going to stand for that. And since 1980, we have continued to be a grassroots movement based in the United States that is working directly with the left in El Salvador, with the unions, with the FMLN, which is now a political party, and against U.S. intervention, against things like the CAFTA, the Central American Free Trade Agreement, against things like the ALEA, the International Law Enforcement Academy, which is the sort of police version of the School of the Americas, which was imposed on El Salvador in 2005, and electoral intervention. The U.S. really tries to make sure that they get to decide who El Salvador's president is, time and time again, and elections are actually on the way. But there recently have been incredible gains in El Salvador. It's an incredibly exciting time. Since 2009, when the very first progressive president, the candidate of the FMLN, Mauricio Funes, won the elections. Despite incredible intimidation and fear campaigns and smear tactics mounted not only in El Salvador by the right wing, but also in the United States by their allies. In 2004 and in 2009, U.S. Congresspeople stood up and threatened the Salvadorans living in the United States with deportation, with saying that all remittances that would go back to El Salvador, that are basically the ways that people can survive, that those would be cut off if the Salvadoran people elected the progressive candidate. So, I mean, these are really, can you imagine if that happened in the United States? You know, if some other country tried to dictate to us who we could elect? And that's exactly what the United States government tries to do. And, the elections in Honduras, which are tomorrow, the U.S. has definitely been on the wrong side of that issue. They're already, making threats around El Salvador's elections, which are in February. And so now more than ever, there needs to be strong resistance here in the United States to confront these threats. Because that was what really supported the election of Mauricio Funes in 2009, which led to incredible changes in education, which our invited guest is going to talk about, but not just education, also healthcare, also re-stimulating the agricultural sector, and a tremendous amount of policies that we're seeing where the government is actually, in El Salvador, is actually being reoriented from an entity that was basically designed to keep the rich rich and the poor poor, to actually providing services to the most marginalized the most excluded sectors of the population. You know, women, the elderly, people in rural communities. And
José Mario López Alvarenga
And Jose Mario Lopez Alvarenga
fue el comandante Venancio Salvatierra.
was later known as the commander.
Y al igual que ellos, muchos maestros y maestras tomaron la decisión de una lucha armada en el país.
So these teachers made the decision to take up an armed struggle in our country.
Bueno, y así se dio la guerra en mi país. No voy a hablar de la guerra en este momento.
And that's how the war happened in my country, and I'm not going to talk too much about the war right now.
Después de firmados los acuerdos de paz en 1992,
After we signed the peace accords in 1992,
inició un proceso de reconciliación y de posguerra en mi país que generó varios fenómenos que actualmente nos afectan.
so we went through a period of reconciliation in my country that generated or created a few situations that are still affecting us today.
100,000 militares se desmovilizaron después de la guerra.
So 100,000 soldiers were demobilized after the war.
15,000 heroicos guerrilleros también se desmovilizaron.
And also 15,000 heroic guerrilla fighters.
Ambos dejaron niños huérfanos, porque muchos cayeron en la guerra y otros emigraron a este país.
On both sides, they left behind orphans because a lot of people died during the war, and also many people migrated to the U.S.
Los gobiernos de la época jamás implementaron políticas para poder incluir en programas a estos niños.
So the governments, the administrations at that time didn't enact policies that would include these orphans, that would create programs for these orphans.
Dicha generación infantil quedó sin protección paternal.
So that generation of kids was left without the protection of parents.
Y en este país, especialmente en Los Ángeles y en California, surgieron las pandillas y luego las exportaron de aquí para El Salvador.
So in places like LA and California, that's how the gangs began to emerge, and then later those gangs were exported back to El Salvador.
Y esos niños desprotegidos fueron víctimas de los pandilleros que expulsaron de Estados Unidos a El Salvador.
And
Y,
so those kids became victims of the gangs that were exported to El Salvador.
y hoy tenemos un problema muy serio, como es la delincuencia juvenil a través de las pandillas y la delincuencia juvenil.
So now we have a serious problem with crime amongst youth in El Salvador.
Pero a pesar de las cosas negativas, que eso es uno de los problemas más grandes,
But despite the negative things such as this, which is one of our biggest problems,